Hi friends and companions along this path of spiritual practice. Throughout this year, we have been emphasizing spiritual practice, daily spiritual practice. And if you've been listening, you've probably heard us increasingly encourage one another into accountability. Surely accountability in our anti-racist and multicultural endeavors. This accountability and covenant, because we need one another to hold us to the disciplines of this work. This is no less true for spiritual practice. When I think about Zen Buddhism in particular, this covenant, this accountability, this sharing in partnership with one another goes back to China and to the Mumunguan, that collection of koans. It traces back to this story of face-to-face encounter between Shakyamuni Buddha and one of the disciples named Mahakashyapa. Once upon a time, at the assembly on the mountain, the Buddha picked up a flower and twirled it in his fingers. All the monks who had gathered there were silent, wondering, confused, except for Mahakashyapa, who broke out into a smile. And the Buddha said, "I have the eye of the true Dharma teaching, the ineffable mind of nirvana, the most subtle of teachings on the formlessness of the form of reality. It is not defined by words and letters. It is specially transmitted outside of scriptures. And I entrust this to Mahakashyapa." This is that seminal story where Zen Buddhism gets its face-to-face transmission. That this spiritual practice finds credibility and is confirmed in encountering one another in relationship. I'm thinking about this story because in that moment, it seems as if all of Zen Buddhism collapses into this singular moment of two people noticing and recognizing one another. And at that moment, the Buddha twirls the flower, and Mahakashyapa notices and recognizes and breaks out into a smile. A flower and a smile. A flower that smiles. A smile that flowers. And the Buddha says, "It is to Mahakashyapa that I transmit this teaching, this heart of Zen Buddhism, this teaching that is beyond scripture, beyond words and letters." And if we think about it, aren't all spiritual truths beyond letters and words and scriptures, beyond doctrine and dogma? There is something visceral in that encounter, something in which we drink in the presence of the other person. Their hands, their feet, their voice, their breath, their face. When I think about it, there is nothing on the human body that is quite as expressive and as revealing as the face. And in the face, I think about the human eye, said to be the window to the soul, right? I think about this visceral encounter that is much more intimate than an intellectual conversation about teachings and doctrines. I think about this face-to-face encounter that is at the heart of confirming our spiritual practice. I think about this relationship of accountability where we can get a sense of our own spiritual practice and how we are journeying by the gift of having another person who is our spiritual companion. In that moment between Buddha and Mahakashyapa, something transpires that is beyond words and letters and scripture. Martin Buber knew about this when he spoke about I-thou relationship. I know many of you are aware he was trying to make a distinction between just experiencing and encountering. Buber goes to great lengths detailing that the word experience comes from peritas, which means to try something out, to test something out of which comes experience, out of which comes expertise and many experts who write doctrine and dogma and scripture. And Buber was saying there is something beyond experience. That is something much more intimate than having a spiritual experience. He was talking about an encounter, of being with, of actually participating in the face of another. That when we are face to face with someone in the intimacy of trust, warts and all, our face becomes their face. That in the eye of the Buddha is Mahakashyapa, and in the very eye of Mahakashyapa is the face of the Buddha. That in that relationship of vulnerability and transparency, we discover our truest face. Throughout our journey, we wear so many people's faces until we discover our truest face. In Zen Buddhism, the expression is, show me your face before your parents, even before your grandparents were born. We need the face of a trusted other to confirm our spiritual practice. This covenantal tradition of which we are a part is exactly about that I-thou encounter. So we are living at a time where we are separate from one another. And yet, this separation is reminding us in such a visceral way what it means to see one another face to face. I pray that each of us in our own way as we are able, as we further along this spiritual path, that we are covenanting with another or with others in a small group with whom we can have a visceral face-to-face encounter, with friends and partners who will reflect back to us our spiritual practice. And that whatever this eye of the true Dharma teaching is, it is the way in which we notice and recognize that which is true. It is this way of seeing that the Buddha entrusts to Mahakashyapa. It is this way of seeing reality and one another that is really being asked at the heart of our anti-racism and multicultural work. It is this way of seeing, this way of orientation with the world that is being asked at the heart of our spiritual practice. And when we see one another face to face, we will break out into a smile. And in that smile will be born the beginnings of the beloved community. And so, friends, we continue in this spiritual practice.